I'm just looking at our ever-expanding list of CSS rules that we have inside our internal style sheet, and I thought I would take a moment and show you, once again, kind of a really cool trick that we can use in CSS to try and slim down, for example, on the amount of code that we're dealing with here, and we can actually start to make our list of rules a little bit more economical. Here's a fantastic example that I want to bounce off of you. Let's take our H1 and H2, our redefined heading 1 and our redefined heading 2, using HTML selectors, of course. And notice that they're both using the same color. The only difference between the two is the size. Well, I can actually work in a slightly more economical way by making use of something called group selectors. Now, this is pretty cool. So this is going to require a little bit of setup here, but from the redefined H1 and H2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the color, just like this. So all that's going to be left is the font size, right? And by the way, take your color there and cut them. We want to paste them in just a moment. Okay, so now the H1 and the H2 are simply saying change the font size to 15 point and 13 point respectively. Go ahead and save your file and refresh your document if you want. And there you go. There's your H1s and H2s coming through in sort of that dark gray charcoal color rather than the peachy orange color. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into my code, and just below my H2, really you can do this anywhere you want inside your list of styles, though it doesn't really matter where. I'm going to create this thing called a group selector. You may have seen these in your travels if you've been messing around with CSS and web design a little bit. I'm going to type in H1, comma, space, H2, space, and then I'm going to throw in my curly brackets, just like this. There we go, something like that. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and paste in that color property with the color value that we've set there. So what I'm doing here is essentially I'm combining two HTML selectors into a single CSS rule, right? So in other words, rather than defining the color twice, I'm simply going to specify it once. Now when I save and refresh my browser, of course, the color comes back, right? So this is kind of a neat way, again, to sort of work a little bit more economically, if you will. And then if I want to come along and change the color, I'm not actually going to go and do it, but you're more than welcome to try this out. Go and change that color value, save your document, and head back to your browser. And of course, your H1s and H2s would change their color, of course, right? So kind of neat. Now, when you specify your selectors, and by the way, we can add on as many as we want here. I could do paragraph, I could do list items, I could do all kinds of different things, right? String them all out here. Make sure you don't put a comma after the last one, otherwise it's not going to work, right? So let's just see what this would look like. There we go. So now everything is showing up in this sort of orangey, peachy color. So that's kind of neat. That's pretty cool. Now, not only can we do this with HTML selectors, H1s and H2s and paragraphs and list items and all the rest of it, but we can also work with group selectors and class rules. We have bold and we have emphasis. And these guys are class selectors, if you'll recall. And we know they're class selectors because they're preceded by periods, right? I'm simply going to set bold to change the font weight to bold. That's it. All this extra stuff that's in here, I'm actually going to get rid of it. Grab all those properties and values and toast them all just like that. So bold simply makes things bold. And same with emphasis. All emphasis is going to do is make things italicized. So I'm going to leave in the font style italic and I'm going to get rid of everything else, just like that. Save up your work and go and refresh your browser just to see the result there. There we go. Nothing too crazy, nothing too insane. Inside my internal style sheet, I'm going to go and create a group selector that's going to contain both bold and emphasis. And once again, you can create this wherever you want inside your list of rules. You can create it down at the bottom if you want. Or maybe myself, I'll create this just beneath the original emphasis. So here's how I'm going to code this. Dot bold, comma space, dot emphasis. And then inside my curly brackets, I'd go and throw in whatever properties, as always, that I want. Maybe I'll do something like text decoration, underline this, and maybe I'll throw in a font family, and maybe I'll throw in a color here as well. And I'll go number sign 3366FF followed by a semicolon, something like this. Save that up, and then flip back over to my browser and refresh. And now anything that has either bold or emphasis applied to it now appears in that blue, and it also appears in Georgia, and it also appears underlined as well, right? So again, what I've done here is I've grouped these guys together rather than specifying all of these properties twice, right? And again, what's cool here is I could come along and I can control individual properties. Maybe I don't want to use Georgia, maybe I wanted to use Verdana, or maybe I didn't want this blue, maybe instead I wanted maybe orange, right? So I can control it all from one single spot, just like that. It's pretty cool stuff. So there you go. There's your group selectors. If you really want to get wild, what you could do is you could combine HTML selectors and your class rules, maybe something like this. H1, H2. You can list out as many of these selectors inside this front end of your rule as you like. Refresh, there we go, something like that. So now everything's underlined and happening there. Group selectors.